Our daughter brought her new boyfriend to Christmas dinner, the seemingly perfect owner of a pharmaceutical company, charming, successful, attentive. But as they were leaving, she quietly slipped my wife a crumpled note, scrawled in shaking handwriting. "Help me, I don't have much time left." I grabbed that perfect man by the wrist, and right then the police arrived. He thought two retired parents were helpless. He was dead wrong. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Frank Gardner. I'm 64 years old, and I live in Lake Oswego, just outside Portland, Oregon, with my wife, Sandra. We've been married for 40 years. Met her when I was 24 and investigating an insurance fraud case at the hospital, where she worked as a psychiatric nurse. She caught me trying to sweet-talk information out of a records clerk and called me out right there in the hallway. I was so embarrassed I could barely speak. She just laughed and said, if I wanted real information, I should buy her coffee and ask like a gentleman. Best coffee of my life. Best decision, too. I spent 35 years as an insurance adjuster, specializing in the cases nobody else wanted. The ones where something didn't add up, where people were lying and thought they were clever enough to get away with it. Retired 2 years ago, but old habits die hard. Sandra says I still look at everyone like they're trying to pull a fast one. She's probably right. Sandra is everything I'm not. Patient, calm, intuitive. She worked in psychiatric care for 20 years, saw things that would break most people. Now she volunteers at a crisis center for domestic violence victims. She also has this hobby, genealogy research, spends hours tracking down family histories, digging through old records. She says it's relaxing. I think she just likes solving puzzles. We're both like that, I guess. Just different kinds of puzzles. We have one daughter, Laura, 34 years old, brilliant, independent, became a licensed pharmacist, got her PharmD, worked her way up to managing the pharmacy department at a big pharmaceutical company downtown. We were so proud, are so proud. She was always the kid who did everything right. Good grades, good choices, good head on her shoulders. 3 months ago, she mentioned someone new. Quentin. Didn't give us much detail, just said she was seeing someone. Said he was successful, busy, that we'd meet him when the time was right. Sandra noticed the change in her voice when she talked about him. Something strained, careful. I told myself I was being paranoid. Occupational hazard. Then came Christmas Eve. Laura called that morning. "Dad, is it okay if I bring Quentin to dinner tonight? He really wants to meet you both." Something in her voice. Too bright, too rehearsed. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "We'd love to meet him." After I hung up, Sandra looked at me from across the kitchen. "You heard it too?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, I heard it." We didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. They arrived at 6. I opened the door, and there he was, Quentin Avery. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage. Perfect smile, perfect handshake, perfect eye contact. Everything about him was calibrated, measured. "Mr. Gardner, Mrs. Gardner, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you. Laura's told me so much about you both." His voice was smooth, too smooth. Behind him, Laura stood with her coat still on, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Sandra moved past me immediately, pulling our daughter into a hug. "Sweetheart, let me take your coat," Sandra said softly. I watched Quentin watching them. His eyes tracked Laura's every movement. Dinner was tense, at least for me and Sandra. Quentin seemed perfectly comfortable telling stories about his pharmaceutical company, Avery Pharmaceuticals. How they were developing breakthrough pain management treatments. How much he cared about making healthcare accessible. All the right words. Laura barely spoke, just smiled when appropriate, nodded at his stories. Under the table, I saw his hand resting on her knee, not gently, possessively. When he reached to touch her shoulder, she flinched, just barely. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Sandra noticed. She always does. During dessert, Quentin excused himself to take a call. The moment he left the room, Sandra leaned forward. "Laura, honey." "I'm fine, Mom," Laura said quickly, too quickly. "Everything's fine. Quentin's wonderful. You'll see." Her hands were shaking. When Quentin returned, the mask was back in place. Perfect boyfriend, charming, attentive, successful, everything a parent should want for their daughter. Except Sandra and I have been reading people for decades, and we both saw the same thing. Our daughter was terrified. After dinner, they moved to leave. Quentin stood in our entryway, helping Laura with her coat, his hand never leaving the small of her back, controlling even that. "We're heading to Seattle for New Year's," he announced. "My family has a place up there. They're very excited to meet Laura." Laura's jaw tightened, just for a second. "How lovely," Sandra said, her voice carefully neutral. I walked them to the door. Quentin shook my hand again, that same practiced grip. "Thank you for a wonderful evening, Mr. Gardner. I can see where Laura gets her strength." I wanted to break his fingers. Instead, I smiled. "Drive safe." As they walked down the path to his car, some expensive foreign thing, Laura glanced back over her shoulder. The look in her eyes hit me like a punch to the gut. She was silently begging for help. Then Quentin opened the car door for her, and she got in. They drove away. Sandra and I stood in the doorway until the taillights disappeared. "Frank," she said quietly, "that man is dangerous." I closed the door. Locked it. I know. That night, Sandra and I couldn't sleep. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared 40 years of meals, arguments, celebrations, grief. Now we sat there trying to figure out how our daughter had ended up with a man who made our skin crawl. "Tell me I'm not crazy," I said. "Tell me you saw what I saw." Sandra wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. Her genealogy research was spread across the table. She'd been working on a family tree for a client earlier that day. "I saw it, Frank. I've seen it before." She looked up at me, and there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Something hard. "You remember what I told you about the psychiatric ward? The patients who came in after years of psychological abuse?" I nodded. That's the look Laura had. The careful words, the flinching, the way she watched him constantly, monitoring his reactions. Sandra's voice cracked slightly. "That's what gaslighting looks like, Frank. That's what control looks like. I worked with women like that for 20 years. I know the signs." "Maybe we're overreacting," I said, even though I didn't believe it. "Maybe—" "My sister?" Sandra interrupted. "Remember Beth?" I went quiet. Sandra rarely talked about her sister. Beth had died 15 years ago. Overdose. But before that, she'd spent a decade in an abusive relationship that had destroyed her. "I couldn't save Beth," Sandra said. Her hands were steady on the mug, but I could see her knuckles were white. I was younger then. I didn't know what to look for. But I know now, Frank. I know exactly what I'm looking at, and I will not let that happen to Laura. I reached across the table and took her hand. "So what do we do?" She looked at me, and I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 40 years ago. Sharp, determined, unbreakable. "We investigate him. You still have contacts from your insurance days, right? People who can dig into someone's background." "Dean Wright," I said immediately. "Retired from the company same time I did. Set up as a private investigator. If there's dirt on this guy, Dean can find it." "Good. I'll use my genealogy databases. Public records, court filings, marriage certificates, death certificates. I can find things most people don't even know exist." We looked at each other across the table. Planning, strategizing, like we'd done 1,000 times before with other problems. But this wasn't someone's fraudulent insurance claim. This was our daughter. "We have to be careful," Sandra said. "If he's as controlling as I think he is, he's watching her, monitoring her communications. We can't contact her directly without putting her at more risk." "Then we gather information first," I agreed. "Build a case. Find out who this bastard really is." Sandra pulled her laptop closer and started typing. I watched her work, methodical, focused. She'd always been the strategic one in our partnership. I was the bulldog who couldn't let go of a case. She was the chess player who saw 10 moves ahead. "Frank," she said after a few minutes, "what's his full name?" "Quentin Avery. Said he owns Avery Pharmaceuticals." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Minutes passed. Then her face changed. "What?" I asked. "He was married before. Wife died 5 years ago. Prescription drug overdose." The room got very cold. "Could be coincidence," I said. Sandra looked at me. "You don't believe in coincidences any more than I do." She was right. In 35 years of investigating insurance fraud, I'd learned that coincidences were usually just patterns you hadn't figured out yet. I stood up and paced to the window. Outside, Lake Oswego was dark and quiet, peaceful, but inside our house, we were at war. "Tomorrow I'll call Dean," I said. "Have him run a full background check, financial records, business dealings, everything. I'll keep digging through public records," Sandra added. "Court cases, restraining orders, anything that might not show up in a standard background check." We worked until 3 in the morning. When we finally went to bed, neither of us really slept. We just lay there in the dark, holding hands, planning our next move. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Text from Laura. "Mom, Dad, sorry, but we can't make it for New Year's. Quentin has important plans in Seattle. Hope you understand." I showed it to Sandra. "He's isolating her," she said flatly. "Classic control tactic. Cut her off from family, from support systems." I typed back, "We understand, sweetheart. We love you." What I wanted to type was, "We're coming to get you." But Sandra was right. We had to be smart about this. Sandra disappeared into her home office. I went down to the basement where I kept my ham radio set up. I'd been an amateur radio operator for 15 years. Call sign KA7FRG. It started as a hobby, but I'd built up quite a collection of equipment over the years, including recording devices. Not that I was planning anything. Not yet, but I believed in being prepared. Around noon, Dean Wright called me back. "Frank, you sitting down? What did you find?" "Your boy Quentin Avery is clean on paper. Successful business, no criminal record, pays his taxes. But I talked to some people I know in the pharmaceutical industry. There are rumors. Whispers about questionable opioid distribution. Nothing proven, nothing charged. But enough smoke that I'm wondering about fire." I thanked Dean and hung up. Went upstairs to find Sandra. She was at her computer, but her face had gone pale. "Frank, I found something. A restraining order filed against Quentin Avery 3 years ago by a woman named Alexa Thompson. It was withdrawn after a week. Withdrawn or dropped? Withdrawn. By her. Which usually means he convinced her to drop it," I finished. "Probably threatened her. Or paid her off." We stared at each other. "We need to talk to her," Sandra said. "Can you find her?" Sandra's smile was grim. "Frank, I can find anyone." That evening we sat on the back porch. The night was cold, but neither of us wanted to go inside. We needed the fresh air, needed to think. "What if we're wrong?" I asked. "What if he really is just a successful guy who loves our daughter?" Sandra turned to look at me. In the porch light, I could see every year of our 40-year marriage in her face. The laugh lines, the worry lines, the strength that had carried us through everything life had thrown at us. "Your gut is telling you something's wrong. My professional experience is telling me something's wrong. Laura's behavior is telling me something's wrong." She took my hand. "We're not wrong, Frank. And even if we were, even if there's a chance we're wrong, can we afford not to check? Can we afford to do nothing and find out later we were right?" I thought about Laura's eyes when she looked back at us. That silent plea. "No," I said. "We can't." Sandra squeezed my hand. "Then we keep digging. We find proof, and we get our daughter away from him. Together," I said. "Always together," she agreed. We sat there in the cold, holding hands, making plans. Two people who'd spent 40 years learning how to work as one unit. We'd investigated insurance fraud, raised a daughter, buried parents, survived cancer scares and job losses and all the normal chaos of life. This was different. This was our child in danger. And if Quentin Avery thought he could hurt our daughter and get away with it, he was about to learn something about Frank and Sandra Gardner. We don't give up. We don't back down. And we protect our own. The morning after Christmas, I made the call. Dean Wright, my old colleague from the insurance company. We'd worked dozens of fraud cases together before he went private. If anyone could dig up dirt on Quentin Avery, it was Dean. "Frank Gardner," he answered. "Haven't heard from you in months." "What's the occasion?" "I need a background check, full workup, financial records, business dealings, everything you can find." "Who's the target?" "Quentin Avery. Owns Avery Pharmaceuticals here in Portland." Dean went quiet for a moment. "The pharmaceutical guy? That's a big fish, Frank. What's this about?" "My daughter's dating him. Something's not right. Say no more. Give me 2 days." While Dean worked his contacts, Sandra disappeared into her home office. I could hear her typing, making phone calls, that focused silence she gets when she's on a trail. Around noon, I brought her coffee. Find anything? She didn't look up from her laptop. His first wife died 5 years ago. Prescription drug overdose, oxycodone. They ruled it accidental, closed the case within 3 weeks. 3 weeks? I set the coffee down. For a pharmaceutical executive's wife, that's fast. Too fast, Sandra agreed. She pulled up another window. And look at this. I found a restraining order filed against him by a woman named Alexa Thompson. Filed 3 years ago. Withdrawn 1 week later. I leaned over her shoulder, reading the court document. Withdrawn by her, not dismissed by the court. Which means he convinced her to drop it. Probably threatened her. Or paid her off. Sandra's voice was flat, clinical. The voice she used when discussing her psychiatric patients. Detached, professional. It meant she was angry. Can you find her? This Alexa Thompson? Sandra's fingers were already flying across the keyboard. Give me an hour. I went down to the basement, to my ham radio setup. Sat in front of the equipment, thinking. The recording devices I had. Technically legal if used with consent. If Laura could give us that consent. If we could get to her alone. My phone buzzed. Text from Laura. Mom, Dad, sorry, but we can't make it for New Year's. Quentin has important plans in Seattle. Hope you understand. I stared at the message. The words were Laura's, but the tone wasn't. Too formal, too careful. I typed back. We understand, sweetheart. We love you. What I wanted to type was, we're coming to get you. But that would tip our hand. Sandra appeared at the basement door. I found Alexa Thompson. She's living in Beaverton now, working as a dental hygienist. I have her work address. We should talk to her. Not yet, Sandra said, coming down the stairs. She sat on the workbench beside my radio equipment. If Quentin finds out we're asking questions, he'll tighten his control on Laura. We need to be smarter than that. She was right. She usually was. So what do we do? Sandra looked at me, and I saw the wheels turning behind her eyes. We give Laura a way to signal us. Something Quentin won't notice. Like what? Remember when she was 15? That fight she had with the Henderson boy at school? I smiled despite everything. She couldn't tell the teacher what really happened, because it would get her friend in trouble. So we came up with the note system, Sandra finished. She'd write us a note, slip it to me when she came home. We'd handle it quietly. You think she'll remember? I think our daughter is desperate for help, and desperate people remember everything that might save them. That night, we sat at the kitchen table, planning. Sandra had her laptop open, still digging through public records. I had my notepad making lists. Old habits from insurance investigations. Document everything, miss nothing. Here's what we know, I said. Quentin's wife died under suspicious circumstances. He has a history of controlling behavior with at least one other woman. Laura is terrified of him but can't or won't leave. Which means he has leverage, Sandra added. Something concrete. Not just psychological manipulation, though that's part of it, but something that makes her feel trapped. Her job, I said suddenly. She works for his company. If he wanted to destroy her career, he could do it, Sandra finished. Pharmacists are heavily regulated. One complaint to the Oregon Medical Board, one accusation of impropriety with controlled substances. We looked at each other across the table. We need proof, Sandra said. Whatever he's holding over her, we need to find it first. Dean's checking financials. If there's anything irregular with the company, he'll find it. Sandra reached across the table and took my hand. Frank, if this gets ugly, and I think it will, we need to be ready for that. I know? I mean really ready. This man is dangerous. He's already killed once, I'm sure of it. His wife didn't accidentally overdose. I squeezed her hand. Then we make sure he can't hurt anyone else. The next morning, Dean called. Your boy Quentin Avery is clean on paper, he said. No criminal record, pays his taxes. Successful business. But Frank, I talked to some people in the pharmaceutical industry. There are whispers, rumors about questionable opioid distribution practices. Nothing proven, nothing charged. But enough smoke that I'm wondering about fire. What kind of questionable practices? Moving controlled substances between facilities without proper documentation. Inconsistencies in inventory reports. The kind of thing that would interest the DEA if they knew where to look. After I hung up, I found Sandra in her office. She was on the phone, her professional voice on. Yes, thank you so much. You've been very helpful. She hung up and turned to me. That was the crisis center. I talked to their legal consultant. She specializes in coercion and blackmail cases. And she says if Laura is being forced to do something illegal under threat, that's a defense. But we'd need proof of the coercion, documented threats, recorded conversations, something concrete. We looked at each other, and I knew we were thinking the same thing. We need to get to Laura, I said, alone. Without Quentin. And we need to give her a way to tell us what's really happening, Sandra added. That evening, Sandra sent Laura a text. Sweetheart, if you ever need help, any kind of help, we're here. Always. No questions asked. The response came an hour later. Thanks, Mom. I'm fine. Really. But Sandra showed me something I'd missed. The timestamp. Laura had typed that message at exactly midnight, the time she used to text us when she was in college and didn't want her roommate to know she was upset. Our daughter was trying to tell us something. She's not fine, Sandra said quietly. No, I agreed. She's not. Several days crawled by. Each morning I woke up wondering if today would be the day Laura called for help. Each night I went to bed, knowing it hadn't happened yet. Sandra spent hours at her computer, building a complete profile on Quentin Avery. I watched her work, methodical, thorough, relentless. She'd tracked down his birth certificate, his college records, every address he'd ever lived at, every business he'd ever owned. My wife could find anyone, anywhere. It was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. On the morning of the 30th, my phone rang. Laura, Dad, is it okay if Quentin and I stop by tonight? He wants to say goodbye before we leave for Seattle tomorrow. Her voice was too bright, rehearsed. Of course, sweetheart. What time? Around 7? After I hung up, I found Sandra in the kitchen. She was already pulling a small notepad and pen from the drawer. She called, I said. I heard. He's coming here. That's good. It's our territory. You think she'll use the signal? Sandra slipped the notepad and pen into her cardigan pocket. If she remembers, if she gets the chance, if he gives her even 1 second alone. We spent the afternoon preparing. Sandra baked cookies, Laura's favorite, chocolate chip, normal grandparent behavior. But her hands were steady, her face calm. Battle ready. I paced. Check my watch every 15 minutes. Finally, Sandra caught my arm. Frank, we need to appear normal, warm, welcoming. If Quentin suspects we're on to him, this won't work. I know. Can you do it? Can you sit across from the man who's hurting our daughter and smile? I looked at her. Can you? I worked in psychiatric care for 20 years. I smiled at people who'd done unspeakable things while I figured out how to help their victims. Yes, I can do it. Right. My wife, steel wrapped in silk. At 7:03, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Quentin's perfect smile and Laura's haunted eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, thank you for having us on such short notice. Quentin stepped inside, his hand on Laura's lower back. Possessive. Controlling. Come in, Sandra said warmly, pulling Laura into a hug. I watched her palm the notepad and pen, sliding them into Laura's coat pocket in one smooth motion. Decades of practice making subtle movements. Medical precision. The evening was torture. Quentin held court in our living room, talking about his company, his success, his plans. Laura sat beside him, silent. His hand rested on her knee under the coffee table. Every time she shifted, his grip tightened. I wanted to break his fingers. Instead, I smiled and offered him more coffee. Sandra was magnificent. She asked questions, laughed at his stories, played the charming hostess. But I could see it in her eyes. She was cataloging every micro-expression, every controlling gesture, every time Laura flinched. Around 8:30, Quentin's phone rang. He excused himself, stepping into the hallway to take the call. Sandra moved immediately. She crossed to Laura, sat beside her, took her hand. Laura, honey, she whispered, remember our old tradition? With the notes? Laura's eyes widened, just for a second. Then she gave the smallest nod. Quentin's voice drifted from the hallway. No, tell them the shipment needs to be rerouted through the Beaverton facility. Sandra squeezed Laura's hand once, then returned to her seat. The whole interaction took maybe 10 seconds. When Quentin returned, his smile was back in place. Sorry about that. Business never sleeps. We understand, I said, though what I really understood was that my daughter was trapped by this man and running out of time. They left around 9. Sandra helped Laura with her coat, the same coat where she'd hidden the notepad. Laura's hands went to the pockets, found the items. Her eyes met Sandra's for just a moment. Then Quentin's hand was on her back again, steering her toward the door. Thank you for a lovely evening, he said. We'll see you when we get back from Seattle. Maybe New Year's dinner? That would be wonderful, Sandra lied smoothly. I stood at the door watching them walk to Quentin's car. Laura looked back once, just once, and in her eyes I saw something I recognized from my insurance fraud cases. Someone about to take a desperate risk. They got in the car, drove away. Sandra closed the door, locked it. We stood in the hallway, not speaking. Then Sandra's phone buzzed. Text from Laura. Got home safe. Quentin says hi. Standard message, nothing suspicious. But Sandra showed me the screen. Hidden in the middle of the text was a single letter, capitalized wrong. Home. Should have been lowercase. It's a signal, Sandra said. She's telling us she got the note. Now what? Now we wait, and hope she's brave enough to use it. We didn't sleep that night, just sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee, watching the clock. At 2 a.m, I finally spoke. What if she doesn't? What if he's got her too scared? Sandra looked at me across the table. In the dim kitchen light, she looked tired but unbreakable. She wrote that first note on Christmas, Frank, the one where she looked back at us. She's already trying to fight. We just need to give her the ammunition. And if Quentin finds the notepad, then we move to Plan B. We have a Plan B? Sandra smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. I always have a Plan B. You should know that by now. The 30th turned into the 31st. Still nothing. Then around 8 p.m. on New Year's Eve, Sandra's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered, listened. Her face went pale. We'll be right there, she said, and hung up. What? That was a nurse from Providence Portland Medical Center. Laura's in the emergency room. My heart stopped. What happened? They said she fell. Bruised ribs, possible concussion. They're keeping her overnight for observation. Fell? I was already grabbing my coat. Or was pushed. The nurse wouldn't say, but Frank, Laura asked them to call me specifically, not Quentin. We drove to the hospital in silence. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Sandra sat beside me, already on her phone, texting someone. Who are you texting? Dean Wright. I want him to find out everything about Quentin Avery's history with violence. Police reports, hospital visits from his previous relationships, everything. If this bastard put his hands on our daughter, if he did, I'll kill him myself. Sandra reached over and took my hand. No, we're going to be smarter than that. We're going to destroy him legally, completely, so he can never hurt anyone again. Promise me something, I said. When this is over, when Laura is safe, we make sure he pays for everything. Every manipulation, every threat, every bruise. Sandra squeezed my hand. I promise. And Frank, when I make a promise, I keep it. We pulled into the hospital parking lot. Somewhere in that building, our daughter was hurt and scared, and the man who hurt her thought he was untouchable. He was about to learn otherwise. We never made it to the hospital. Halfway there, Laura texted, False alarm. I'm fine. Please don't come. Quentin's here taking care of me. I pulled over, read the message again. It's him, Sandra said quietly. He's typing for her. How do you know? She never uses periods in texts, and she'd never tell us not to come if she was really hurt. I stared at the phone. My daughter was in danger, and I couldn't even get to her. We go anyway, I said, putting the car back in gear. No. Sandra's hand on my arm stopped me. Frank, if we show up now after she told us not to, we look like the crazy parents. We play into his narrative. So we just leave her with him? We go home. We regroup. We think. Her voice was steel. And we find another way. The drive back to Lake Oswego was silent. Every traffic light felt like an hour. When we finally pulled into our driveway, I sat in the car, hands gripping the wheel. I should have done more, I said. When he was in our house, I should have. You did what you could, Sandra interrupted. And now we do what we do best. We investigate. We document. We build a case he can't talk his way out of. Inside, Sandra made coffee while I paced. It was after midnight on New Year's Eve. Somewhere in this city, people were celebrating. We were planning how to save our daughter from a sociopath. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Gardner? A woman's voice, hesitant. This is Alexa Thompson. I heard you were asking about Quentin Avery. I put her on speaker. Sandra moved closer. Who told you that? I still have contacts in the pharmaceutical world. Word gets around. Is it true? Is someone else caught in his trap? My daughter? Sandra said. She's dating him. Silence. Then, I'm so sorry. Can you help us? I asked. Whatever you know about him, whatever happened to you. Not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? Morning. There's a coffee shop in Beaverton, corner of Cedar Hills and Allen. We'll be there, Sandra said immediately. And Mr. Gardner? Mrs. Gardner? Be careful. Quentin doesn't forgive people who try to expose him. I learned that the hard way. She hung up. Sandra and I looked at each other across the kitchen. We're getting close to something, she said. He's worried enough that word of our investigation reached her. Good, I said. Let him worry. We spent what was left of New Year's Eve at the kitchen table, organizing everything we knew. Dean's financial reports, Sandra's genealogy findings, the note Laura had passed us. I made a timeline, cross-referencing dates. Here, I said, pointing to my notepad. 3 months ago, Laura signed those opioid transfer documents. 2 months ago, she suddenly mentioned having a new boyfriend. 1 month ago, she started acting distant. Sandra pulled up something on her laptop. And look at this. Quentin's company had a DEA inspection scheduled for late October. It was postponed to January. January, I repeated, as in right now. As in he needs Laura compliant and quiet for the next few weeks, while the DEA crawls through his records. We looked at each other, and I saw my own realization reflected in Sandra's eyes. This wasn't about love, or even control for its own sake. Laura was a shield. Her credentials, her signature, her reputation. Quentin was using them to cover his illegal operation. He set her up, Sandra said flatly. He needed a licensed pharmacist to sign off on transfers. Someone smart enough to be credible, but naive enough to trust him. So he targeted her, seduced her, got her to sign documents without reading them carefully. And now he owns her, I finished. If the DEA finds discrepancies, her signature is on everything. She goes down, not him. Sandra's hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. We need those documents, she said, the ones Laura signed. We need to prove she didn't know what she was signing. Dean might be able to get them, if they're part of company records. Call him. Now. I called Dean at 12:30 in the morning on New Year's Eve. He answered on the second ring. This better be good, Frank. I need you to get documentation from Avery Pharmaceuticals, internal transfer records for controlled substances from the past 6 months, particularly anything signed by Laura Gardner. Dean whistled low. That's corporate espionage territory, Frank. I can't just walk in and grab files. Can you find someone who can? Pause. How bad is this? Bad enough that if we don't move fast, my daughter either goes to prison or disappears into an abusive relationship. Maybe both. Give me 2 days. I have a contact who used to work there. Left on bad terms. Might be willing to talk? After I hung up, Sandra showed me her phone. She'd been texting with the lawyer from the crisis center. I explained the situation, she said. The lawyer wants to meet with us. She thinks we have grounds for a coercion defense, but we need proof that Quentin manipulated Laura into signing those documents. How do we prove that? We get Laura to tell us what happened, on record, with witnesses. Sandra, we can't even get 5 minutes alone with her. Then we create an opportunity, Sandra said. She had that look, the strategic one that meant she was 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Quentin thinks he's won. He got Laura to deny needing help in front of the police. He thinks we'll back off now, scared of looking like overreacting parents. And we won't? She smiled. It wasn't warm. No, we'll let him think we backed off, and then we'll hit him from an angle he's not watching. The next morning, we met Alexa Thompson at a quiet coffee shop in Beaverton. She was younger than I expected, maybe 29, with careful eyes that tracked every person who entered. She relaxed slightly when she saw us. Two people in their 60s, holding hands like nervous grandparents. Harmless. She had no idea. We sat. Sandra ordered for all of us, her way of putting Alexa at ease. Small gesture, maternal. I watched it work. "Thank you for meeting us," Sandra said softly. Alexa wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. When I heard someone was asking about Quentin, I had to reach out. I've been waiting for this, hoping someone would finally see through him. "Tell us what happened," I said, and she did. The story poured out, how she'd met Quentin at a charity gala 3 years ago, how charming he'd been, how he'd isolated her from friends, controlled her finances, made her doubt her own memory, and then when she'd tried to leave, he'd threatened her career. She was a dental hygienist. He'd claimed she'd stolen prescription pads from her office. Completely false, but he had documentation. Forged, obviously, but convincing enough to destroy her. "I filed a restraining order," she said, voice shaking. "But he showed me what he'd do if I didn't drop it. Photos of the fake evidence. A letter already written to the Oregon Board of Dentistry. He said if I pursued the restraining order, he'd send it all. I'd lose my license. Maybe face criminal charges." "So you dropped it," Sandra said. "I dropped it. And I left town for 6 months. Came back when I thought it was safe." Alexa looked at us. "Your daughter. He's doing the same thing to her, isn't he?" "We think so," I said carefully. "But we don't have proof." Alexa reached into her purse, pulled out a folder. "I kept everything. Every text message, every email, every document he used to threaten me. I couldn't use it before. I was too scared. But if it helps your daughter—" She pushed the folder across the table. "It's all here. His pattern, his methods, everything." Sandra's hand covered Alexa's. "Thank you." "There's something else," Alexa said quietly. "His first wife, Christine. The one who died, she was a pharmacist too, just like your daughter." The coffee shop seemed to go very quiet. "What are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying Quentin has a type. Professional women in healthcare, women with access to controlled substances. And I'm saying Christine didn't accidentally overdose. She tried to leave him, and 3 days later, she was dead." Sandra and I walked to the car in silence, got in, sat there holding the folder Alexa had given us. "He killed her," Sandra said, not a question. "We can't prove that. It was ruled accidental." "Frank," Sandra turned to me, "he targeted pharmacists. He's done this before. And when Christine tried to leave—" "I know." I started the car. "Which is why we move fast, before Laura becomes another tragic accident." That afternoon, Dean called. His contact at Avery Pharmaceuticals had come through. We met him at a parking garage downtown, very cloak and dagger, but Dean insisted. He handed me a flash drive. Everything Laura signed in the past 6 months. Transfer authorizations, inventory reports, distribution schedules. "Frank, these documents, they're a mess. Half the required fields aren't filled in. Quantities don't match. It's sloppy work designed to fail DEA inspection." "And Laura's signature is on all of it," I said. "On everything that matters. Your daughter was set up perfectly. When the DEA comes knocking, she's the fall guy." Back home, Sandra and I spread everything out on the dining room table. Alexa's documentation of Quentin's pattern, Dean's financial reports showing suspicious opioid transfers, the flash drive with Laura's signature on incomplete, illegal documents. "We have proof he's done this before," Sandra said, pointing to Alexa's folder. "We have proof he's running an illegal operation. We have proof Laura's signature was used on improper documentation. What we don't have is proof that he coerced her specifically." "So we get it," I said. "How?" I looked at Sandra. "What if Laura wore a wire? What if she got him to admit on tape that he's blackmailing her?" "That's incredibly dangerous, Frank. If he finds the device—" "So we use something small, something he wouldn't notice. I have recording equipment in the basement, tiny microphones, voice-activated. I use them for my ham radio work." Sandra was quiet, thinking. "Then, we'd need her consent, and we'd need to make sure she's protected if something goes wrong. We could involve the police. That detective, Morrison, he seemed skeptical of Quentin." "Not yet," Sandra said. "First we talk to the lawyer. Make sure everything we're planning is legal. Then we approach Laura. If she agrees, we move forward." She pulled out her phone, started typing an email to the crisis center lawyer. I went to the basement, started going through my equipment. Small recording devices, voice-activated, with battery life of up to 6 hours. Perfect for what we needed. When I came back upstairs, Sandra had her laptop open, reviewing Alexa's documentation. "Frank, look at this." She turned the screen. Alexa documented every manipulation tactic Quentin used. Gaslighting, isolation, financial control, threats. It's like a playbook. And if you compare it to what we've observed with Laura, she pulled up her notes from the past few weeks. Our observations of Quentin's behavior. Every controlling gesture, every dismissive comment, every time he'd answered for Laura. It matched. Exactly. "He's following the same pattern," Sandra said, "which means we can predict his next moves." "What's his next move?" Sandra looked at me, and I saw fear in her eyes for the first time since this started. "Isolation. Complete control. He'll try to cut her off from us entirely. Maybe move her somewhere we can't reach her. He knows we're suspicious. He knows we tried to intervene, so he'll eliminate the threat we represent." My phone buzzed. Text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, this is Quentin. I wanted to reach out personally. I'm sorry about the confusion last night. Laura and I have discussed it, and we've decided it's best if we take some space from family for a while. Please respect our boundaries. We'll be in touch when Laura's ready." I showed it to Sandra. She read it twice. Then she stood up, walked to the window, looked out at our quiet street. "No," she said finally. "Absolutely not. He doesn't get to cut us out of her life. He doesn't get to isolate her further. Sandra," she turned back to me, "we've been reactive this whole time, responding to his moves. No more. Tomorrow, we go on offense. What do you have in mind?" We stop trying to save Laura quietly. We make noise. We contact the DEA directly with what we have. We talk to Detective Morrison. We hire the lawyer. We create so much pressure on Quentin that he has to focus on defending himself instead of controlling Laura. That could backfire. He could retaliate against her. Or it could give her the opening she needs to get away from him. Sandra's jaw was set. "I'm not losing our daughter to this monster, Frank. Not quietly. Not politely. If we have to burn his entire world down to save her, that's what we'll do." I looked at my wife, this woman I'd loved for 40 years. She'd never looked more fierce, more determined, more dangerous. I smiled. "Okay then," I said. "Let's burn it down." The next morning, Sandra and I sat at the kitchen table mapping out our offensive. We had Alexa's documentation, Dean's financial evidence, and the flash drive with Laura's forged signatures. What we needed was Laura's voice, literally. "She works Wednesdays until 6, Sandra said, checking Laura's usual schedule on her phone. "The pharmacy closes at 7, but the staff leaves through the back entrance around 6:15. "Quentin picks her up?" "Usually. But on Wednesdays he has board meetings until 7:30. She drives herself those days." I looked at my wife. "You're thinking of intercepting her." "I'm thinking we have a 15-minute window to give her the recording device and explain how to use it." Sandra's voice was steady, but I could see the fear underneath. "If Quentin finds it, if she gets caught, then we make sure she doesn't get caught." I went to the basement, came back with a device smaller than a lipstick tube. Voice-activated battery life of 8 hours. Recordings uploaded automatically to a secure cloud server. She keeps this in her pocket. It only activates when someone speaks. Quentin will never know. Sandra held the tiny device, turning it over in her fingers. "And if he searches her? Why would he? He thinks he's won. He got the police to side with him. He sent us that text establishing boundaries. In his mind, we've backed down like scared parents." "Good," Sandra said, slipping the device into her purse. "Let him think that." Wednesday came slowly. I spent the morning reviewing everything with our lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in coercion cases through the crisis center. She listened to our plan, made notes, asked pointed questions. "The recording is legal in Oregon as long as one party consents," she confirmed. "Laura can record her own conversations without Quentin's knowledge. But Mrs. Gardner, Sandra, you need to be careful approaching her. If Quentin has any surveillance on her movements—" "I'll be careful," Sandra promised. At 5:30 that evening, Sandra left. I watched her drive away, heading to the Avery Pharmaceuticals building downtown. My job was to stay by the phone, monitor the cloud server where the device would upload, and be ready to move if something went wrong. I sat in the basement with my ham radio equipment, waiting. Every minute felt like an hour. At 6:20, my phone buzzed. Text from Sandra. Contact made. Device delivered. She understands. I let out a breath I'd been holding for 45 minutes. Sandra came home an hour later. She looked exhausted but determined. Tell me, I said. She sank into a chair at the kitchen table. I waited by the back entrance. Laura came out alone, like we predicted. When she saw me, she almost ran. But she didn't. No, she didn't. Sandra's voice softened. Frank, she's so scared. She's lost weight. There are dark circles under her eyes. That man is destroying her. I took her hand. What did you tell her? I told her we knew about the documents, about the blackmail, about Quentin's pattern with other women. I told her she has a way out. But we need proof of the coercion. Sandra pulled the empty device case from her purse. I showed her how to use it. Explained it uploads automatically, so even if he finds and destroys it, we'll have the recordings. How did she react? She took it. Her hands were shaking, but she took it. Then Quentin texted asking where she was, and she panicked. I told her we love her, that we're not giving up, and she ran to her car. We sat in silence for a moment. Now we wait, I said. Now we wait, Sandra agreed. The next 2 days were agony. No word from Laura. No uploads to the cloud server. Sandra checked her phone every 15 minutes. I found excuses to go to the basement and refresh the server page. Nothing. Maybe he found it, I said on Friday night. Or maybe she hasn't had an opportunity to use it safely, Sandra countered. Give her time. Saturday morning. Still nothing. Saturday afternoon. Sandra made lunch we didn't eat. Saturday evening. I was ready to drive to Quentin's penthouse and break the door down. Then, at 8:47 p.m., my laptop chimed. File upload notification. Sandra and I scrambled to the computer. There it was, an audio file, 15 minutes long, time-stamped less than an hour ago. My hand hovered over the play button. Ready? I asked. Sandra nodded, her hand finding mine. I pressed play, static. Then Quentin's voice, smooth and controlled. Laura, we need to discuss your attitude lately. My attitude? Laura's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. Quentin, I just asked if we could have dinner with my parents. After I specifically told you we needed space from them. They're a bad influence. They're making you doubt us. They're my parents. And I'm your future. His tone shifted colder. Or have you forgotten what happens if you leave? What I showed you. Those documents with your signature? Silence. Then Laura, barely audible. No, I haven't forgotten. Good. Because let me be very clear, Laura. If you try to leave me, if you go to your parents, if you even think about going to the authorities, I will destroy you. That DEA investigation next week, your signature is on every single document they're going to find problematic. You'll lose your license. You'll face federal charges. You'll spend the next decade in prison. But I didn't know. It doesn't matter what you knew. It matters what you signed, your name, your credentials, your responsibility. A pause. I'm the only thing standing between you and complete ruin. As long as you stay with me, do what I say, I can protect you. Make this all go away. But the moment you stop being useful, his voice trailed off, the threat hanging in the air. I understand, Laura whispered. Do you? Because that little stunt with your mother the other day, meeting her in the parking lot, did you think I wouldn't find out? I have cameras on the building, Laura. I see everything. My blood went cold. He'd known Sandra approached her and hadn't done anything yet, which meant, you're testing her, Sandra breathed, waiting to see if she'll betray you. The recording continued. Quentin's voice turned almost gentle, which was somehow worse. I don't want to hurt you, Laura. I care about you. But you need to understand, you belong with me, not them. They can't protect you. Only I can. The file ended. Sandra and I sat in silence, the weight of what we'd just heard settling over us. That bastard, I said finally. Sandra was already on her phone dialing Patricia Chen. We have it. We have everything we need. Patricia Chen came to our house within an hour. She listened to the recording 3 times, making notes, her expression growing darker with each replay. This is textbook coercive control, she said finally. Blackmail, threats, psychological manipulation, combined with Alexa Thompson's testimony about his pattern, the documentary evidence of the forged documents, and Laura's own statement, we have a strong case. Strong enough to protect Laura from the DEA charges? I asked. With this? Yes. She was clearly operating under duress. The recording proves Quentin deliberately set her up and is using the threat of prosecution to control her. Patricia looked between us. But we need to move carefully. Quentin Avery is wealthy, connected, and dangerous. If we tip our hand too early, he'll retaliate against Laura, Sandra finished. Exactly. We need to approach the DEA directly, present everything at once, and get Laura into protective custody before Quentin knows what's happening. How do we do that? I asked. Patricia pulled out her phone. I have a contact, Assistant U.S. Attorney Marcus Webb. He works with the DEA on pharmaceutical fraud cases. I'll set up a meeting for Monday morning. After she left, Sandra and I couldn't sleep. We lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. 2 more days, Sandra said quietly. Then we make our move. 2 more days Laura has to be with him, I added. Sandra's hand found mine in the dark. She's stronger than he thinks. She got us that recording. She's fighting back. Sunday crawled by. I checked the cloud server obsessively. 3 more uploads, each one more damning than the last. Quentin threatening Laura's career. Quentin isolating her from friends. Quentin describing in detail how he'd manipulated the documents to ensure her signature appeared on everything illegal. The man was so arrogant he was confessing his entire scheme to her, confident she was too terrified to do anything about it. He had no idea we were listening to every word. Monday morning, Sandra and I arrived at the Federal Building in downtown Portland. Patricia met us outside with a slim man in his 40s, Assistant U.S., Attorney Marcus Webb. Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, he said, shaking our hands. Patricia briefed me on the situation. I've been following the Avery Pharmaceuticals case for 6 months. If you have what she says you have... We went to a conference room. I plugged in my laptop, pulled up the audio files. Webb listened to the first recording, his expression unreadable. Then the second. Then the third. When the 4th recording finished, the one where Quentin explicitly described how he'd forged Laura's signature on key documents. Webb sat back in his chair. Son of a bitch, he said quietly. We knew something was wrong with those transfers. The documentation was sloppy, but without an inside witness. You have one now, Sandra said, our daughter, but only if you can guarantee her protection. Webb looked at Patricia, then back to us. Here's what I can offer. Full immunity for Laura in exchange for her cooperation and testimony. We'll bring her in under protective custody. Keep her safe while we build the case against Avery. Given the recordings and the evidence you've provided, we can probably get an arrest warrant by end of day. What about her license? I asked. The Oregon Medical Board? With evidence of coercion and her cooperation with federal prosecutors, I'll personally recommend to the board that any disciplinary action be suspended, pending the outcome of the federal case. He leaned forward. But I need to talk to Laura directly. Is she willing to come in? Sandra and I looked at each other. That was the question, wasn't it? Would Laura take the final step? I'll call her, Sandra said. She stepped out of the conference room. Through the glass wall, I watched her pace, phone to her ear, talking, waiting, talking more. Her face crumpled briefly, a crack in her armor, then hardened again. She came back in. She'll do it, Sandra said. She's terrified, but she'll do it. She works until 6 today. She can come here directly after. Webb nodded. We'll have protection waiting. If Avery tries to intercept her... He won't know, I interrupted. She'll tell him she's working late on inventory. He never checks. He has cameras on the building, but not inside the pharmacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same surveillance Quentin used to control Laura would work in our favor. He'd see her car in the parking garage and assume she was working. By the time he realized she wasn't there, we'd have her safe. All right, Webb said. 6 p.m. Have her come to the underground parking entrance on 4th Street. I'll have 2 marshals waiting to bring her in. We shook hands, made plans, coordinated timing. As we left the federal building, Sandra grabbed my arm. Frank, this is really happening. We're really going to get her out. We are, I confirmed. And then we're going to watch Quentin Avery's world burn. That afternoon felt longer than the previous 2 weeks combined. Every minute ticked by with excruciating slowness. At 5:30, Sandra texted Laura. "We're ready. Are you?" The response came 30 seconds later. "I'm ready." At 5:45, my phone rang. Detective Morrison, the same cop who'd responded when I grabbed Quentin on New Year's Eve. "Mr. Gardner, I'm calling as a courtesy. The U.S. Attorney's Office has requested police support for an operation tonight involving Quentin Avery. They gave me a heads up that your daughter is involved as a witness." "That's correct?" Morrison was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you didn't give up." "When I came to your house that night, something felt off, but without evidence." "We found the evidence," I said. "Good. Because men like Avery, they think they're untouchable. It's satisfying as hell when they learn otherwise." At 6:03 p.m., Sandra's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Package secure." Laura was safe. At 6:15, my phone rang again. "Patricia Chen. We have her. She's giving her statement now. Webb is getting the arrest warrant expedited. By morning, Quentin Avery will be in custody." I hung up and looked at Sandra. She was crying, quiet tears running down her face. I pulled her into my arms. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "We did it together," I corrected, "like everything else." That night, Sandra and I sat in our kitchen drinking coffee, too wired to sleep. Somewhere in this city, Laura was safe in a hotel under federal protection. Somewhere else, Quentin Avery had no idea his perfect world was about to collapse. Tomorrow morning, everything would change, and I couldn't wait to see his face when he realized exactly who he'd been messing with. The next morning, Sandra went to meet Detective Morrison. I wanted to go with her, but we'd agreed. She handled the police angle while I coordinated with the federal prosecutor. Division of labor, like we'd always done. Morrison worked out of the central precinct downtown. Sandra texted me from the parking lot. "Going in now." I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, waiting. 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. Finally, he's in. He's angry. He wants to help. I let out a breath. Morrison had been the skeptical cop who'd sided with Quentin on New Year's Eve. But Sandra had just shown him the recordings, showed him how he'd been manipulated. Cops don't like being played any more than insurance adjusters do. An hour later, Sandra came home with news. Morrison had already contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office. They'd coordinated with the DEA. By tomorrow afternoon, they'd have an arrest warrant for Quentin Avery. But they needed Laura's cooperation. They needed her to come in, make a statement, agree to testify. "How do we get her away from him safely?" Sandra asked. "We planned it like a military operation." Laura worked until 6 every day. Quentin had standing meetings on Tuesday afternoons that ran until 7:30. That gave us a 90-minute window. But we couldn't just call Laura. Quentin monitored her phone. Instead, Dean Wright, remember him? The private investigator, had a burner phone delivered to Laura's office. Anonymous package. No return address. Inside, just a phone with one contact saved. Dad. That evening, the burner rang in Laura's hand. She answered. "Laura, don't say anything, don't react. Just listen." My voice kept steady despite my racing heart. "Tomorrow at 3 p.m., you have a lunch break. Leave the building. Walk to Stumptown Coffee, 3 blocks north. Detective Morrison will be waiting. He'll take you somewhere safe. We have the evidence. We have immunity from the DEA. You won't go to prison. Your license is protected. All you have to do is walk out that door." Silence. Then barely a whisper. "Okay. We love you, sweetheart." "I know." Her voice broke. "I love you too." She hung up. Sandra and I looked at each other across the kitchen. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," I agreed. That night, neither of us slept. We went over the plan a dozen times, checked every detail, prepared for every contingency. At 2 a.m., Sandra made coffee. "What if he suspects?" she asked quietly. "Then Morrison will be ready. He's bringing backup. Laura will be protected. What if she changes her mind? What if she's too scared?" I took Sandra's hand. "Then we try again. And again. Until she's free. However long it takes." She squeezed my fingers. 40 years of marriage, Frank. We've never quit on anything. Not starting now." The next day crawled. 2:45 p.m., my phone rang. "Morrison, we're in position. 2 plainclothes officers watching the building exits. I'm inside the coffee shop. No sign of Avery. Good. At 2:58, Morrison's voice came through again. She's here, walking toward the entrance, alone. Thank God, Sandra breathed beside me. She's inside. We have her. She's safe. I closed my eyes, felt Sandra's arms around me. We stood in our kitchen, holding each other, not speaking. Our daughter was safe. An hour later, Morrison called with updates. Laura was giving her statement. The prosecutor was drafting the arrest warrant. By morning, Quentin Avery would be in custody. There's something else, Morrison said. Your daughter wanted me to tell you something. She said, tell my parents they saved my life. I had to sit down. That evening, Sandra and I drove to a hotel in Teagard, where Laura was being kept under protection. Federal marshals checked our IDs before letting us into the room. Laura stood when we entered. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, dark circles under her eyes, but when she saw us, she started crying. Sandra got to her first, wrapped our daughter in her arms while I stood there trying not to fall apart. I'm sorry, Laura kept saying. I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner. I should have... Shh, Sandra said. You're safe now. That's all that matters. I joined the embrace. My girls, my family. We stayed for 2 hours. Laura told us everything. How Quentin had slowly isolated her. How he'd manipulated her into signing documents. How he'd threatened her when she tried to leave. How she'd felt trapped with no way out. I thought I was so smart, she said bitterly. A licensed pharmacist. How could I fall for his tricks? He's a professional predator, Sandra said firmly. He's done this before. You're not the first, and without us stopping him, you wouldn't have been the last. Laura looked at me. Dad, when you grabbed him on New Year's Eve, when the police came. I wanted to scream the truth so badly, but he was right there, and I knew if I did, he'd destroy everything. I know, sweetheart, but you got us that note. That was the beginning. That's when we knew for sure we had to act. What happens now? She asked. Now? I smiled. Now we watch justice work. The arrest warrant goes through tonight. Tomorrow morning, Quentin Avery gets exactly what he deserves. Sandra and I left the hotel around 8 p.m., drove home in comfortable silence. As we pulled into our driveway, Sandra spoke. We did it, Frank. We actually did it. We did it together, I corrected her, like everything else. Inside, we made tea and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd planned this entire operation. You know what I keep thinking about? Sandra said. That first night, Christmas Eve, when we saw how scared Laura was. Part of me wanted to believe we were overreacting. But you didn't. No, because I'd seen this before. I knew the signs, and you trusted me. Always have, always will, she smiled, took my hand across the table. Tomorrow, when they arrest him, I want to be there. Sandra, I want to see his face when he realizes he lost, when he understands that the old couple he dismissed as weak and harmless destroyed him. I looked at my wife, this woman who'd stood beside me for 4 decades, who'd fought for our daughter with everything she had, who'd never wavered, never quit. Okay, I said, we'll be there. Together. The next morning, Sandra and I met Morrison at the Federal Building. He walked us to an observation room with a one-way mirror overlooking an interview room. Avery doesn't know you're here, Morrison explained. We're bringing him in for questioning. The arrest warrant is already signed. He'll be in custody within the hour. At 9:45 a.m., they brought Quentin in. He wore his perfect suit, his perfect smile, completely confident. He actually looked annoyed, like this was wasting his valuable time. The prosecutor, Marcus Webb, sat across from him with a folder. Mr. Avery, thank you for coming in. I don't have much time, Quentin said smoothly. I have a board meeting at 11. This won't take long. Webb opened the folder. We're investigating some irregularities in your company's controlled substance distribution. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. Your compliance team didn't sign these documents. Laura Gardner did. Quentin's smile didn't waver. Laura is my head pharmacist. Of course she signed them. Under duress? Webb pushed a paper across the table. We have recordings, Mr. Avery, of you threatening Mrs. Gardner, blackmailing her, coercing her into participating in your illegal operation. For the first time, Quentin's smile slipped, just slightly. That's absurd. Laura and I are in a relationship. We discuss work matters. You threatened to send her to prison if she left you. Webb played one of the audio files. Quentin's own voice filled the room. You'll spend the next decade in prison. I'm the only thing standing between you and complete ruin. The color drained from Quentin's face. Beside me, Sandra squeezed my hand. I could feel her satisfaction matching my own. Where did you get that? Quentin demanded. Laura gave it to us, along with several other recordings. She's agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for immunity. Quentin stood up fast enough to knock his chair backward. You can't. I want my lawyer. Now. Of course. Webb nodded to Morrison, who stepped forward. But first, Quentin Avery, you're under arrest for blackmail, coercion, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and fraud. I watched as Morrison read him his rights, watched as they put handcuffs on Quentin's wrists, watched as the perfect mask finally shattered completely. This is a mistake, Quentin shouted. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I can? We know exactly who you are, Webb interrupted calmly. We also know about your first wife's death. We've reopened that investigation, and we've located Alexa Thompson, who's willing to testify about your pattern of abuse. Quentin stopped struggling, went very still. In that moment, he knew. He'd lost everything. As they led him toward the door, he saw the one-way mirror. Couldn't see through it, of course, but maybe he sensed something, because he stopped, looked right at where Sandra and I stood watching. The Gardners, he said quietly. They did this. Laura's parents? Webb sounded almost amused. They're just concerned parents. Surely you don't think two retired people in their 60s could bring down your entire operation? Quentin didn't answer, but I saw the realization in his eyes. He knew. He understood exactly who'd beaten him. They took him away. Sandra and I stayed in the observation room, watching the empty chair where he'd sat. How do you feel? Sandra asked. Satisfied, I said. Justice isn't revenge. It's making sure dangerous people can't hurt anyone else. He'll go to prison. For a long time, if Webb has anything to say about it. We left the federal building and drove to the hotel where Laura was staying. She met us in the lobby, looking lighter somehow. The fear was gone from her eyes. It's over, I told her. He's been arrested. She closed her eyes, breathed. It's really over? Really over, Sandra confirmed. You're free. Over the next 3 weeks, Laura gave her testimony. The DEA investigation expanded, finding years of illegal distribution, forged prescriptions, fraudulent insurance claims. Quentin's company was shut down, his assets frozen. The Oregon Medical Board held a hearing for Laura. With the evidence of coercion, they suspended her license for 2 years, with the possibility of reinstatement upon completion of additional ethics training and therapy. No prison. No permanent loss of her career. A second chance. Laura moved back into our house while she looked for a new place. Started therapy. Started healing. One evening in early February, Sandra and I sat on our back porch. The same porch where we'd planned our investigation, where we'd decided to fight back. Laura was inside on a call with a friend from pharmacy school, laughing. Actual laughter, not the careful, monitored sound we'd heard at Christmas, but real joy. We saved her, Sandra said softly. We did. I took her hand. 40 years of marriage, Sandra. 40 years of being a team. I couldn't have done this without you. We've always been better together than apart. I thought about that, about how we'd divided the tasks based on our strengths, how we'd trusted each other's instincts, how we'd never doubted, never quit. You know what Quentin's mistake was? I said. What? He saw two old people who'd be easy to manipulate. He dismissed us as weak. He thought love made us soft. Sandra smiled. When really, it made us dangerous. Exactly. Because when you threaten someone we love, you're not facing one person. You're facing both of us. 40 years of partnership. 40 years of learning how to work as one unit. From inside, Laura called out, Mom, Dad, do you want tea? We'll be right there, Sandra called back. We stood still holding hands, walked back inside together, where we belonged, with our daughter safe, our family whole. Quentin Avery had tried to break us. Instead, he'd learned what happens when you underestimate the power of two people who've spent 4 decades becoming stronger together. He'd gambled that our love made us vulnerable. He'd lost that bet. And as Sandra and I sat down for tea with Laura, listening to her talk about her therapy sessions and her plans for the future, I couldn't help but smile. Justice wasn't just about winning, it was about standing together when the world tried to tear you apart. And nobody, absolutely nobody, messes with 40 years of marriage and gets away with it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.